Click the bell icon to get latest videos from Ekeeda.
Hello friends, we'll be learning the specimen of how a journal entry is passed and what all details you are required to understand the specimen of journal entry. So, when we spoke about journal entries, we spoke about a lot of things, documenting things, founding the golden rule, real account, personal account, nominal account, and then passing on these journal entries so that all these journal entries are recorded under one roof, and this can be further classified as under ledger balance. It can be classified under account titles and then can be used for preparation of trial balance, etc. Now, to understand the specimen, I have given you a detail of certain specimen which has been mentioned here. We'll be taking some normal examples for you. You can note down the examples if you want to, and then we can further write down the entries which will give you a clear idea about how any transaction is passed in here. If you can see, it is a 5-column transaction or a 5-column specimen. First being date, second being particulars, third being ledger folio, fourth being debit amount, and the fifth being credit amount. Now, any transaction which needs to be recorded will have a specific date, will have a specific account, will have a specific ledger folio and certain amounts to give you a precise idea about what you are dealing with or which transaction you are dealing with. So the first thing that you need to mention is the date of the transaction. It can be either 31st December 2018, it can be either 31st March 2018. Now, when we talk about any transaction, each transaction will have a specific date which has to be recorded on this specimen. This is the place where we'll be recording the date of the transaction. We can either write the complete date or you can write it in short forms as per the requirement of the sum. Now, the next part is the particulars, where you'll be passing on your journal entries and there will be a narration added to this specific transaction to give you a clear idea about which transaction it is. Hence, we mentioned the transaction here. If you remember, we had an example in the previous video where we were talking about credit sales to Mr. Mohan. Let's take that example. Let's note down this example for yourself, where there's a credit sales of rupees 10,000 done to Mr. Mohan. Now we'll pass on a transaction here which states Mohan account debit to sales. If you can see that we have a specification which has been already mentioned, Mohan account debit to rupees 10,000 to sales account rupees 10,000. We have already passed this journal entry. Now we'll find out what is the narration that I was talking about. Narration is nothing, just to mention the gist of the transaction, which will be mentioned right below the transaction. This will be in this format itself, which will give you a clear idea about what this transaction was about, to whom does it relate, and what kind of transaction was it. Either it is a purchase transaction, whether it's a sales transaction, either it's an expense, whether it's an income that has been credited, etc., etc. However, just to give you a brief idea about what narration is, this is how you write down the narration here. The next step is to mention down the amount that has been made for the transaction. Now in this transaction we had a credit sales of rupees 10,000. Hence, Mohan account has been debited with rupees 10,000, as you can see, which has been mentioned here, and similarly sales account will be credited with rupees 10,000. If you can find out that when we talk about rectification of errors, the same journal entries are supposed to be passed down here. Hence, when we talk about rectification of any errors that needs to be done, you need to make sure that the journal entries are passed in these specific ways with narration down there. Now, the column that we have missed here is the ledger folio. This will consist the folio number of the ledger where the balance transfers are being done. So if you have this specific entry being passed here, that is Mohan account debit to sales account, there will be a specific ledger account which will be there for these specific account titles. So Mohan ledger account will be there, sales ledger account will be there, whereby all these transactions will be mentioned there. So we'll have a specific ledger number like ledger number 1, ledger number 2, or the transaction in that specific ledger which will be associated with this specific folio. Hence that number should match here. This is just for your reference. If you have to tally all these transactions, that will make life easier for you, and hence the ledger folio column has been mentioned. However, in our questions we don't have these specific ledger folios being mentioned, hence it will be just a blank column if you want to write it down. So this is how the specimen of journal entries is prepared, and this is how the transactions are mentioned down with your 5-column step, whereby date is mentioned, particulars are mentioned along with the narration, ledger folio can be mentioned if the question describes so, and the debit and the credit amount. So this is what you have learned in this video, where you'll be learning about how a journal entry is passed, how journal entry specimen is passed, and how the transactions are recorded along with the narrations. Thank you for watching this video. Keep subscribing to Ekeeda and stay tuned with Ekeeda.